I've drummed it into our players that they are privileged to play for you.
Corner taken quickly, Origi! Yeah!
And Mission Impossible is accomplished. It's 7 for Liverpool. Sensational, astonishing, incredible.
Du hører på Pausepraten, en podcast fra Liverpool-supporterklubb Norge.
Hei og hjertelig velkommen til en ny episode av Pausepraten. Nå som det er landslagspause, så tenkte vi det var en gyllen anledning til å få svar på noe av det vi lurer på rundt Liverpool FC, og det har kommet inn veldig mange lytterspørsmål som vi er glad for til selveste David Lynch, en av de journalistene som følger Liverpool aller tettest. Så nå skal han komme med en oppdatering spesielt på hvordan det går med kontrakter, om det kanskje blir noen spillerkjøp i januar og så videre. Men aller først så må vi spørre om ukas viktigste sak. David, it's been quite a busy start to the international break because of the David Coote story. We're not going to go too much into that, but can you tell us how Liverpool FC have reacted to the news?
Yeah, so kind of all quiet on that front, really. Very much my understanding that Liverpool won't be making a comment at the moment or anytime soon until kind of the PGMOL's investigation is completed. And to be honest, I think that makes sense, that stance, because you know there is no need really for them to steam in and comment on this. I think it's got a life of its own, really, and they don't really need to add to the mix. It's very clear to everyone what was said in the videos and what's gone on in the videos, and I guess you've got to kind of leave it up to David Coote's bosses now to make a decision on what happens next. And I think it's, to be honest, quite a straightforward decision they're going to have to make. And maybe we will hear from Liverpool after that decision's been made, but not anything while the investigation's ongoing, and we don't know quite how long that's going to take at the moment.
What did you make of especially the first video that came out?
I thought it was incredibly stupid for someone in his position to be caught doing that, to be honest, and saying those things. I mean, one thing I will say is that I've absolutely no doubt that referees speak in this way. I think we're all human beings and can kind of understand that. If you work with someone who you don't particularly get on with and someone who maybe shouts in your face, you would probably have unfavourable things to say about them. So for me, I don't think it says anything about that he would treat Liverpool in a different way. I'm sure he's made poor decisions for all clubs, by the way, because in my opinion, he's actually one of the lesser Premier League refs, I would say, or to phrase it less kindly, maybe one of the worst Premier League refs. And that's always been my feeling. Not that he dislikes Liverpool, but he's just not a fantastic referee, to be honest. So I never kind of bought into that idea that he's judging them harshly. But the crucial thing here is that while I don't think he was judging Liverpool harshly or that grudge he maybe had against Jurgen Klopp had affected any of his decision-making, the fact is, for that to be publicly out there, it does call into question, and it allows these conspiracy theories to kind of take hold. And I think in a professional environment, which the PGMOL are trying to establish among referees, you can't really stand for that. And I think that's why it's probably going to, as with everything else, even before the secondary video came out, it's probably going to cost him his job, to be honest.
Yeah. Let's see where that story goes, but we're going to jump straight to the thing everyone is wondering about. We have received lots and lots of questions about the contracts of Trent, Virgil and Mo Salah, and Øyvind puts the easiest question for you. I need to know everything about the contract situation, so please tell us what you know.
I mean, I wish there was kind of more to update in terms of solid information at the moment. It is very quiet. I think the one thing I can confidently say and say is absolutely true is that talks with all three players are currently ongoing. Obviously, that's not massively helpful when everybody wants a resolution and want to get there as soon as possible, but at least those talks are happening at the moment. And yeah, it's a tricky one, waiting and seeing how that'll sort of pan out. But I still sort of lean towards optimism on all three situations. I think there's a desire on both sides to get this sorted out. So, you know, I still have a confidence. I know people's confidence is waning the longer this goes on, but I still think, you know, those talks are ongoing. So let's kind of see how they go.
Nils Erik has noted that both Trent and Salah have the international break off and they remain at the Merseyside. Do you think the club has a plan for this, or are we going to use the opportunity to speak to them and their agents?
I think it'll make very little difference, if I'm honest, because those talks do just go on with the agents in the background. The player will set out what they want, will tell their representatives, and they can kind of allow the club and the representatives to just get on with it themselves, so apart from kind of key moments when you get towards the end. So I don't think that will have a massive influence at all. I think those talks, whether both have been sent away on international duty or not, would have carried on. So that is still the case. I don't think that will be hugely influential in terms of what happens.
You told me in the summer that Salah is the one you were most unsure about. Now Anders wants to know if what's the chance of renewal of each of the three players, in your opinion?
Yeah, so it's interesting, really. I mean, with Salah, I kind of am growing in confidence around that one purely on the basis of everything he said since the summer. I said, one of the reasons I thought it was the trickiest, and I still think this is an element that makes it tricky, is he is so high paid in comparison to the rest of the squad. Liverpool won't want to tie themselves into a contract that will, catch them out if he suddenly declines at some point. And that decline is coming, as much as we don't want to acknowledge it. He is going to drop off a cliff at some point. Unfortunately, nobody can outrun time. So his wages does make that still, I think, the trickiest. But all that it's about in contract situations and these negotiations is, where can you find the compromise? And if you've got a player who's repeatedly coming out in the press with his social media posts, he's making it very, very clear that he absolutely wants to stay. He wants to keep breaking records. He wants to be higher up the scorers list for Liverpool, in the Premier League all-time list. If you've got someone who's saying these things, he clearly wants to stick around. That gives you some room for compromise. And that compromise may be, maybe Salah would absolutely love a 3-year contract, but I think there's too much risk in that for Liverpool, particularly as, 3-year contract from here would actually be 4 years when you factor in we've got so much of this season left to run. That for me would be too risky, but a 2-year contract with the potential get out of Saudi there, I think is massively helpful for Liverpool. And because Salah's so willing to compromise, maybe it becomes easier to kind of reach that agreement. So I have extra confidence than I did maybe over the summer with Salah. In terms of the other two, I think Virgil, in theory, should be straightforward. He isn't as highly paid as Mo Salah. He plays in a position where you can play for longer, and we've seen evidence of that in many players at centre-halves who've played for a lot longer, and he's still quite clearly operating at the peak of his powers as well. And again, he's repeatedly told us when we've stopped him in the mix zone that he wants to stay. So again, should be a straightforward one. And with Trent, again, people are getting a little bit more worried about this one the longer it goes on, but it's my understanding that Liverpool, as far as they're aware, they haven't been told he wants to go to Real Madrid. That for me is the only thing that could stand in the way if he turned around and said, actually, I do want to try something new, because Liverpool have repeatedly shown they will pay the big bucks to players who are coming into the peak years. They know how important he is, know how good he is. He's a Scouser, future captain of the club. So there's no question there about Liverpool's desperation to want him to stay. The only question mark over Trent, and something he's not quite emphatically ruled out yet, is that he would leave on a free transfer to go to Real Madrid. But Liverpool certainly aren't under that impression at the moment, and those talks are ongoing. So as I say, I think reasons for optimism around all three, even with the trickier ones like Mo Salah. So I don't think people should be too worried, and we're still a little while to go till January yet. That's when it maybe gets really worrying. So hopefully we start to see some resolutions over the next month and a half.
Oscar has a question on the Real Madrid links to Trent. Do you think there's any possibility they will let him go in January to get some money for him, or do you think if he goes, then it's on a free in the summer?
Yeah, absolutely no chance. I would say that he would be sold to Real Madrid. I think we can emphatically rule that out. And that's all sources are sort of telling me that that's the case. There's no chance. Whatever happens, the worst case scenario as far as Liverpool are concerned is that he does leave on a free transfer. But they wouldn't, hit the compromise there of selling him in January to Real Madrid. That just absolutely won't happen. Not least as well because I doubt Real Madrid would pay the money anyway. They'd much rather wait, and if they know they're going to get the player at the end of the season, if they can, on a free transfer. So I would expect that to be their approach anyway, and Liverpool would knock it back. So I think no chance of that. But Liverpool's focus, as I say, is still very much on getting Trent tied down, and they're absolutely desperate to do that, and will throw everything they can at it to get that done.
If you ask me, it should be quite simple in Salah's case, because you just throw the same terms at the table and say 2 more years, and I think he probably would go along with that, but it's more complicated than that, I guess, the negotiations. Christian asks if you can explain what the club is thinking in terms of player age, positions on the pitch, wages, contract length, and so on. How much there is to consider.
Well, that's it. I think age is a massive factor. I think particularly with a Mo Salah, who's, I think those forward positions, I always feel that the drop-off is a lot more sudden, generally speaking. I mean, some really good examples in recent Premier League history of this, I think, and a lot of them seemingly played for Arsenal for some reason, but Alexis Sanchez very suddenly dropped off a cliff. Aubameyang, I think Ozil did exactly the same. And a lot of these were just after they got massive contracts as well. So I think Liverpool really do want to protect themselves against that. And that is why, and as I say, with the length of contract there, say a 3-year, it's actually 4 years. Like I say, it's a long, long time away from this point if you were going to dish out one of those contracts. So I think that's a massive factor. They want to protect themselves against that. But as I say, and I say that's particularly acute with Mo Salah because he's on so much money as well. But as I say, there is that get out there with him, in that he will always be that Arab icon, and that interest from Saudi Arabia and the money that they would invest to get him will always kind of be there, or at least I think Liverpool can rely on it for the scale of a 2-year contract. So I think that really helps them out in terms of if there is that decline, and it would be kind of an acknowledgement if he did drop off a cliff maybe next season that, okay, maybe we cut this short, you go to Saudi Arabia and everyone's kind of happy. So I do think that option is kind of there for them and something they can rely on. So that all these factors kind of come together, and we know, and this has been a bit of a feature really under Michael Edwards in the past, is that past a certain age they are really reluctant about contracts. But also one of the factors that comes in is that they've repeatedly said and kind of briefed the idea that it's very, very hard to find players who are good enough to improve or reach the level of this Liverpool team. Now, if you were to lose 3 of this quality, arguably 3 best players, your 3 most influential players, and you already acknowledge it's hard to find players of this quality, you're creating a huge headache for yourself. And again, this is another thing that gives me optimism, is I find it really hard to imagine that Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes are going to want to find themselves in a situation where they have to replace these 3 players, because they know it's almost impossible. And if they want to put themselves in that scenario, fair enough, and we will judge them by how they do in that. But I really struggle to see it, because they've got players who, Van Dijk and Mo Salah and Trent, are operating in, you would say all 3 of them really are, top 3 players in the world in their respective positions. They, no way will Liverpool want to have to find that again, all ahead of next season. So again, this is another element where compromise perhaps comes from Liverpool's side as well, because they've got that nagging at them that they just can't afford to lose these players. So all these things add together. They're all factors in terms of how contracts are decided, and it's all, as I say, always about where the compromise comes from, and maybe there's motivations for both sides to find that kind of middle ground.
And of course FSG are do you think the FSG are worried about the wage structure if they give too big deals to these players, and other players will come around and ask for the same money?
I can't imagine it'll have a great influence on it, to be honest. I think everyone in the squad would absolutely recognise that Trent deserves to be one of the highest paid in the squad because of his standing in it. And with the other 2, as you say, I think, for me, and this is not something I've had completely confirmed, but it's just more kind of conjecture on my part, but I'd be really surprised if either Mo Salah or Virgil van Dijk were to receive a pay bump. I think at this stage of the career, we're very much talking about contracts on the same terms that they're currently on. And that's where the agreement would maybe be found. So I don't think the only disruption to the wage structure really comes in Trent's contract. And like I say, you looked around the squad, I don't think anyone could argue if he got that massive pay bump, he absolutely deserves at this point. So I don't think that's a massive concern. And I would also play down really the influence of FSG on this. Obviously, they do set the budgets and what Liverpool can spend on transfers and wages, but outside of that budget being set, it's very much up to Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes how that is spent, and they'll know how much that money is. As I say, there's only one contract really jumping up there. They've lost Thiago's wages last summer, who was one of the really big ones. So I think really it's more down to what the sporting director decides. He will have the biggest influence on that, and there's not a lot of big money decisions really being made there around the contracts. It's more, do you want to kind of keep the wage bill as it is? So it's totally up to them really, and not one FSG, even if it goes pear-shaped, probably deserve to take the blame for, to be honest.
And it will probably be way more expensive to replace the 3 players than pay them 2 more years.
But this is another factor as well, not just being able to actually identify the players, but being able to afford them. Finding a centre half with the output that Virgil van Dijk provides, same with Mo Salah, same with Trent. Good luck with that, and then good luck finding ones who are coming on free transfers, and you don't have to spend any money because you've got no money coming in from these players leaving. It's be a crazy situation to find themselves in, and I just really, really struggle to see them putting themselves in that scenario. Really, so. I think they will do anything they can to kind of avoid it.
You mentioned Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes. Terje wants to know if Edwards has anything to do with contracts and transfers, or if Hughes has the full responsibility.
I think Hughes will have the primary responsibility there. I mean, he's not just been brought in as an underling to Michael Edwards. He is, Michael Edwards is bigger picture stuff, but I've no doubt that because he's relatively new, Michael Edwards already has the relationships with the agents there, and it is still kind of early days in his reign. That I've no doubt that Michael Edwards is chipping in now, maybe more than he would in 6 months' time, in a year's time. I think he will be having an influence and an input into this, but I don't expect that will be the case, generally speaking, going forward. I think it will be left to Richard Hughes because that is, his job title, and that's what he should be doing. He's the sporting director. He shouldn't be being undermined, but I don't think it's a case of being undermined here. I think it's more that Michael Edwards has that expertise. He has the relationships already, and so he can be a helpful figure in terms of getting these over the line.
One thing that has annoyed me, especially this season, is that Arne Slot has to answer all the questions on contracts while Hughes is silent. Do you know why they do it that way?
I guess it's always been the Liverpool way. The sporting director hasn't really spoken much or ever, actually. When it was Michael Edwards, we never saw him. I think it was kind of a bit of a bonus, actually, that we did get Richard Hughes near the start of the season when he made that appearance at the press conference, and he made the point in that as well, which is very similar to what Arne Slot's saying, in that Liverpool don't want to play these out publicly. They want to, they like the privacy of the situation. They want to respect the players' wishes and do it quietly behind the scene. And so, that is how they're playing it. And I think all you would get if we saw Richard Hughes is a straight bat, really, the same as we're getting from Arne Slot, because they just want to keep it internally. So I understand that, why Liverpool are taking that policy of the sporting director not appearing, because I doubt there's much he could say. I mean, I, from a journalistic perspective, would love to see more of him and hear more from him. But I don't expect that is going to change anytime soon. And as I say, I doubt really that there's much he could say that would be particularly insightful on this.
You've gone to Slot's press conference for 3 months now. How has he been compared to Klopp?
Yeah, very different. I think you could see that straight away, really, that he's not quite as out there and not as gregarious as he. He's a bit more of a kind of quiet, reserved character. And I did think in the first few weeks as well that he was particularly kind of withdrawn. And I think, because I'd watched his final press conferences and saw him kind of joking away and having a laugh, not quite at Klopp levels, but, he seemed really relaxed in those situations. And I thought in his first few for Liverpool, he was kind of holding a lot back. And I think that's kind of understandable. I don't think he wanted to come in and be seen as kind of someone who was trying to mimic what Jurgen Klopp is like and trying to copy him in any way. And obviously, he's speaking in a second language more regularly than he will have at any point in his life. He doesn't know the journalists particularly well, so it is an uncomfortable situation. But I think what we've seen over the last few weeks, particularly because results are there to back him up as well, he just seems increasingly comfortable to me and confident in these moments. He is joking more. He is sort of relaxed around the answers. He's very confident in how he addresses situations. So I've really noticed he's kind of really settling into it now, and we're seeing a little bit more of his personality, which is fantastic. And it is very different to Jurgen. He's just a different type of character. but a confident character. I think, you can get the feeling that players will really get behind him, and he's got a good relationship with the journalists so far as well. So that kind of bodes well and is helpful for everyone, really, I suppose.
Let's hope it stays that way if the form drops.
Yeah.
But till now, top of the league, top of the Champions League. But some fans still want new players in January, and Liverpool have done some great transfers in January the last few years with Diaz, Gakpo, Van Dijk, and Suarez and Sturridge before that. Do you know if they're looking out for someone this January?
Yeah, always. I absolutely wouldn't rule out January editions. As you say, it, for all it kind of gets made out to be a difficult market, Liverpool are pretty active in it, and they have been in recent years. So there's always a possibility for a January move. And I think, the one thing you would say is that consistently they always want that January edition not to be kind of a short term and fill a gap. They generally want it to be someone who is, they want in the squad for the next 5 years. So they won't go out there and look for a short-term fix. But I do think, they missed out on a midfielder over the summer. There's potential there to address that. If that right player is available, if his club makes him available, if he wants to come, in the case of maybe Zubimendi. But also, touching on Zubimendi, he's an interesting one because, look, if he says, I still want to stay at Sociedad, I'm not available in January. But Liverpool think, but he's still perfect for us. And if we can get some guarantees, we can get him in the summer. They'll wait, won't they? We again, this is something we've seen. They won't just go and get any other midfielder. They'd rather kind of hold on for someone who they've identified as kind of perfect for the system. So a lot depends really on who's available and if it's the right player and whether Liverpool have moved on from Zubimendi or they've identified someone who can do similar things, or whether it is Zubimendi and they'd rather wait for him. But I would not at all rule out January business, because I think it's a market that's worked well for Liverpool, and they are always scouring the market looking for opportunities to improve the squad.
And we saw 2022 when Diaz came in and gave the team a lift, and they almost won everything. Arne wants to see something similar this season. He says we have a great opportunity to go for the title and have to go all in January. And he's one of many listeners who wants Omar Marmoush, the striker from Frankfurt. Yeah,
so to be honest, I'm kind of skeptical about this link, really. I mean, seeing where it's come from feels slightly agent-driven to me. I mean, the one thing I will say is a player of that age who is banging goals in a top 5 European league, Liverpool will be looking at them. They'll be keeping an eye on how they're getting on. But in terms of whether Liverpool would move for him in January, as I say, I'm extremely sceptical, and I've had no encouragement on that whatsoever. And my question would be about this is that seemingly people are excited about the idea of him coming in, but I don't feel that Liverpool are short in attack. I mean, they've got 6 frontline attackers. Obviously, it's been a difficult start for Chiesa, and we're in November and we've barely seen him. But if this is going to be the status quo for his Liverpool career, then you might as well sell him immediately. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we are going to see more from Chiesa. He's going to be a genuine option all across the front line. Obviously, Jota's been a miss, but he's back very, very soon. We're seeing improvement from Núñez. You've seen Diaz and Gakpo both flying. Salah absolutely flying as well. Liverpool have got really good options in attack, and I just don't see where you would fit a 7th attacker in at the moment. It would absolutely have to, if he is, I don't think he's going to be a target for January. Maybe he's someone they look at towards the summer, but it would surely require a departure. I don't see how any club could carry 7 frontline senior attackers and give them all minutes and that work out, even with injuries included. I just don't think it's realistic. So I would kind of rule out Marmoush for January. I don't think the forward line will be an area that they look at in that period. But maybe he's someone they're keeping an eye on for windows beyond that. But again, I haven't kind of received encouragement on that so far.
I guess Núñez is the one we're not quite sure if he's going to improve enough to be the main striker.
Yeah, but I guess the decision on that would have to be made probably at the end of this season. I don't think we're in a situation now where Arne Slot has said, this guy is so bad that I can't even use him till January. Let's sort this out. We can get rid of him. So I don't expect that at all. I think Núñez at the very least will be around till the end of the season. And I have to say his recent performances, I was ready to kind of write him off at the early point of this season. And I think on plenty of strong evidence on the last 2 seasons, plus his start to this one. But I think last few games since he's come in for Jota, I think he's done really, really well. He's looked safe in possession. He's looked calmer. And he scored a couple of goals now this season. So I think we are starting to see some improvement from him. Whether that's enough to salvage his Liverpool career, we'll find out at the end of the season and the many more performances that are yet to come. But I don't think it's in a desperate situation where you have to jettison him in January, and I really don't think that will be the case.
Why would they change too much now? Disrupt the mood. It looked like there's a great mood in the camp as well. What's your impression of that?
Yeah, I think the players seem to be really enjoying it. I think they're enjoying a kind of change of voice that they're listening to, a change of ideas, giving them a kind of a fresh challenge to get into. You look at the way Trent's embraced how he's defending now, and he really seems to be getting into that and loving the fact that Arne Slot is onto him and criticising him, but also praising him when he makes those advancements in his defending. And I think generally across the squad, they really kind of enjoying playing this type of more controlled football. And that's not to kind of do down Jurgen Klopp in any way. I just think sometimes it being so long, you need a change. And I spoke to someone at the club actually over the summer, someone who works close to the first team, about this, and he said it was kind of needed. He said things needed to get freshened up. It needed it got a little bit stale, and they needed a new voice in, and not just obviously Jurgen himself, but he said the staff in general. He said the staff now is younger, it's hungrier, and that freshness coming in, he says, has been provided a real boost. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think it's reflected in the way the players are embracing this challenge as well. They seem to be really enjoying it. The mood around the place looks really good, and that obviously it helps when you're winning in that regard. But also, I think the two things are working hand in hand in the confidence and happiness, and it's helping the wins, and the wins are helping the confidence and the happiness, and it's a virtuous circle really that we hope will continue till the end of the season.
What has impressed you most with the Slot so far? I read your piece on the defensive statistics. People should check it out on davidlynch.co.uk. But is that the most impressive thing, or is there anything else?
Just to correct you there, davidlynchlfc.co.uk. I think davidlynch.co.uk might just be about the film director, so I don't want to just direct you there. So, maybe check out my Substack instead of a website about the director. But I think the thing that's impressed me most probably is the speed really with which he's embedded some of these changes. As you say, the defensive solidity. I mean, you think about tightening a team up, you sometimes think there's going to be a trade-off there in terms of losing a bit of attacking cutting edge, but that hasn't really happened. Liverpool still look sharp, and as I say, just the speed with which he's got them on board with this defending work, and if 6 goals in 11 games, I mean, that's on track to concede 20 across a Premier League season, which would be the third best record in Premier League history, which shows you how good they've been, and they deserve it as well. The underlying numbers are very good and support the fact that this isn't just good fortune, it's a team that's good at defending. So, creating that buy-in so quickly amongst a group of players who maybe don't know you that well and have been under a legendary manager for so long is extremely difficult, and particularly that is the case when you've had a very interrupted pre-season with the fact it's been international tournaments and you haven't got your players back till very late in the day. I just think that's been hugely impressive, and to add in that solidity. And I think it's a big reason why Liverpool, are right up there at the start of the season, and a big reason why they can keep this challenge going, because amongst everything else that they've got quality-wise, they are now very, very hard to score against, and that maybe wasn't the case over the last couple of seasons. So great to see that steeliness, and I think it's been a really, really impressive achievement from Arne Slot to get it done so quickly.
Do you think there's any player in particular you could call the most important at the moment, or is it the team performance?
I think it's tough because there's been so many good performances. I mean, you list through them, you go from back to front. I mean, Kelleher's up there, even though he's come in as the second choice goalkeeper. Konate flying this season. Van Dijk, Trent's as good as ever. I think Tsimikas has been great. Gravenberch playing out of his skin. And everything else that's going on up top. It's really kind of tough to pick out a key man. I think the one player I would least like Liverpool to get an injury to, and I mean, I hope that none of them get injuries and Liverpool get improvements on that front, which is, by the way, a very, very important thing this season that has to happen. You can't get anywhere near as many injuries as last season, and that was one of the things we were impressed by with the new manager and his staff, is that they did seem to get fewer injuries, so fingers crossed on that one. But I think the player I would least like to lose maybe is Mo Salah. I just think scoring goals and assisting goals is the hardest thing to do in football. That's why they get paid the most. It's the thing you would maybe miss the most. And so losing him for any sustained period, I think, will be a significant blow. So maybe he is just sneaking that most important player, but there's been some really, really good performances and contenders for that status so far this season, which shows you how well Liverpool are doing.
We got a question from Vegard about, he wants to know if you could tell us how working as a Liverpool FC reporter is. How is the day-to-day work, and what kind of people are you talking to get information?
Yeah, so day-to-day it's different. Obviously, in a week like this, international break, it's kind of quieter. So I'm not at a press conference. I'm not at matches this week, and that's nice because you get to write some more reflective pieces and do that sort of stuff and big picture stuff. So I really do enjoy those breaks. But generally, obviously, your week is dictated by the fact that you've got a press conference probably on the Tuesday, then you're at a game on a Wednesday, then you're back at a press conference on a Friday, and then you've got a game at the weekend. So everything is kind of built around that, and how, that sets the tone for what you're writing about. Because usually, if Arne Slot particularly praises Konate after a game, that sets your tone for the next piece you write. Then somebody plays well in the next game, or Slot says in a press conference that Harvey Elliott's going to miss the start of the season. You write about what a blow that is. So generally speaking, that is kind of how your week is dictated. Really, is on the schedule that the players are on. Really, and in terms of getting information around stories, obviously I can't talk about who I get information from. But it's fair to say, from my perspective, obviously I did used to work for Liverpool. That's quite handy in terms of having a few friends who work there too and around the club. And, generally you can get tips as well from anywhere, supporters who might know someone who might tip you off with something, that kind of thing. The information kind of comes from absolutely everywhere, really. And a lot of the time, you've got to go to the club and check that out. And sometimes they can help you out and say, yes, that's true. Sometimes you can say, I'm not touching that. And that, you check that with the press officer. But you've got to kind of make a judgment on that from that point onwards. And if it's not helpful to Liverpool to confirm it, they obviously just won't. But sometimes it's nothing, and so they will. And, for example, injuries, they prefer to leave to the manager. So very hard to check those ones out. But if you get a tip off from someone who is being particularly helpful to you down the years, and that their information is good, then you can write it. So it's all about making those kinds of judgments, really. And that's the life of a journalist in general, really, is kind of trying to discern what information, the information you get, the source of it, how good that source is, and whether you can risk staking your reputation on it. And I think I may be more cautious than most in terms of that, but it just means that I, generally speaking, I haven't been caught out too many times in terms of writing something that absolutely isn't true.
And in terms of player access, you've spoken to Robertson after the Villa game, and you mentioned Van Dijk as well. How easy is it to get them to speak?
Yeah, not easy at all, to be honest. I would say Virgil van Dijk is very, very good for coming through the mix zone. The problem is the mix zone at Anfield is set up in such a way that there's a door around the back that the players can actually go through without coming past the journalists. So it is very hard to catch them. And Virgil is always very generous with his time, so I massively appreciate that. We would miss him if he did go, so fingers crossed he signs a new contract. And because they've got that set up, actually, it's really interesting because with the Robertson one, as you say, he'd made the choice to come through to speak to us. I feel like he clearly, well, as I wrote in that piece, he kind of had something to get off his chest. He wanted to make that point. Look, I hear the doubters, and I'm here to prove them wrong. So I thought that was really interesting. But generally speaking, the mix zone at Anfield isn't that productive outside of Van Dijk. But it's usually, if you go to away games, they're set up in such a way that the players always have to walk past you. So generally they are, happier really and more useful in terms of getting players. It's not particularly great at Anfield because they've got that way to sneak through, unfortunately.
And access to players for supporters are maybe even more difficult. We got a question on that as well. Do you have any tips to where they can get closest to them?
Yeah, it's really tough these days, because even outside the training ground, if you were to go up there on a training day, you're going to struggle to get anything, because there's signs up at the front that I always drive past that say, look, we've asked the players not to stop here because it's a safety issue. So we go in on an entrance on the other side. So I'm pretty sure they probably do from time to time stop to maybe sign things or get photos with people, but they are advised not to. So unfortunately, that's quite difficult, really. I think getting close to the players is more difficult than it's ever been, unfortunately. And that's just the nature of the way football has grown. And I think that is a real shame. So if you do come over to Liverpool, you're going to struggle to get close to them. It's worth maybe going down to see the training ground anyway and see what you can get. But yeah, it's trickier than it's ever been, unfortunately. But that's how football is these days, and it's a big money industry, and the players are protected and kind of pushed away from fans a little bit in comparison to how it used to be, where you'd go to Melwood and you'd be able to watch over the bins and see them training, and they'd come out and speak to you.
And Arne Slot removed the one opportunity to get close to them when they stopped staying at the Titanic Hotel before games. That's one place.
We won't even see them on the walk now, unfortunately. Yeah.
But it has to be that way, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well, by the way, that just these little things that they change in terms of, injury preparation. I'm not saying a walk would ever injure anyone, but the way that they prepare for games, being in your own bed, is that better for you? Do you get a better night's rest when you're there? Obviously, Curtis Jones probably doesn't, because he's got a little baby at home, so he probably wish he was in a hotel sometimes. But generally speaking, they clearly, these are the kind of decisions you make in terms of how do we get our players well rested for games? What times do we train at? Again, that's another thing that Arne Slot has changed, is pretty religiously now that they're training at 12 o'clock, bang on, rather than moving the times around as they did under Jurgen. I think there's no right or wrong answer on that, and the judgment will be made in terms of how they do in terms of injuries, how they do in terms of the players' performances across the season. That's how you will judge it. But it is interesting, those changes are going on from manager to manager, and we'll see what the impact of those is.
Yeah, he's maybe changed more than we can see out on the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the little tweaks that we don't even hear mention of, really, and things that the way of training, the way that physical preparation is done. Touch wood, I think Liverpool haven't done too badly in terms of injuries so far, and you want to see improvement there. As I say, that was a key performance indicator, really, for Arne Slot when he was coming in, is to try and get the injuries right down. So, I'm sure everything will be being monitored in terms of whether these things and these tweaks that he's making will work and can help on injuries, can help in terms of level of performance. And the early signs are really good, but we will have to see over the course of an entire season, really, to kind of judge how those tweaks are working.
Let's hope for more good times and 3 more contracts the next time we speak. Thank you so much for taking your time, and once again, David Lynch, lfc.co.uk. That's where they can read your insight.
That's the one. Thank you very much. No, pleasure to come on as always. I think the tusen tack, is it?
Tusen tack, yeah, that's tack. That's correct. Thank you.